Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse in the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Vayarach Hashem Esreach Anichoyach. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse, Mitzvah Shabbos Parshas Noach, was the Saturday night after Parshas Noach, and that year there was the night before the seventh day of Mar Cheshvan in the year Tafshin Mem, 46 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in this week's Torah portion where it says, "Vayarach Hashem esreach anichoyach." God smelt a pleasing fragrance from the sacrifices, and He said, "Lo Yosef," He's not going to go ahead and destroy the world anymore. Lo Yishboistu, there's going to be everything's going to run normally and everything's going to be stable. And afterwards, God says, "I'm going to go ahead. He may make him as brisi. He's going to make a bond." So the Medrash says that when it says "Vayarach Hashem esreach anichoyach," that God smelled the pleasing fragrance. So the Medrash says, you know what fragrance He smelled? Not obviously the sacrifices were literally, but He smelled the pleasing fragrance of Avraham Avinu. That when Abraham, they wanted to throw him into the fiery furnace, so he smelled the fragrance of Avraham Avinu, who was going on self-sacrifice for Hashem. Then the Medrash continues on. He smelled the pleasing fragrance from Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, going up from the furnace that they went on Mesiras Nefesh. And then the third thing the Medrash says, also the pleasing fragrance from the generation that will put the test to give up their religion. In other words, in the sacrifices that Noach went ahead and brought up in the altar, what Hashem smelled was a self-sacrifice of Avraham Avinu, the self-sacrifice of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the times of the prophets, and in the times of Nebuchadnezzar, and the self-sacrifice of the generation of the Shmad when people had to give up their lives for being Jewish. And the Medrash continues on to say, this is what the verse says, Ze Dershav. This is the generation that Derish, that seeks out, Mevakshe Panecha. We're looking for the face, Yaakov, Sela, everlasting. So the previous Rebbe in the Chassidic discourse explains, what does that mean, this generation? In other words, their generation. Even though it's the generation, they want them to give up their Judaism. But nevertheless, what do they want? What are they looking for? Mevakshe Panecha. They want to see the face of Hashem. What does the face of Hashem spiritually mean? The pnimius, the internal part of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Why is that? Because they want to be Yaakov Sela. They want to be the descendant of Jacob, Sela, everlasting. And obviously you can add, based on what it's known, that we know that Yaakov, the word Yaakov comes from Yud, the letter Yud, and Akev, the heel. In other words, the idea is to bring down the Yud of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and even higher, and bring it down to the Akev, to the lowest places. And how should it be? Sela, everlasting. Means that there's not going to be any changes. Good times, bad times, challenging times, we want to connect to Hashem. And like it says, anytime it says Netzach Sela Vayed, Ein Lo Yefsek, it doesn't have any stop, and it's always there, it's always connected. And obviously we know the point that the different Chabad Rebbeim bring out, that even by the pleasing fragrance of the sacrifice that Noach brought, even though it's a great thing, so why are we saying that the bond that God made with Noach to keep the world alive, like He says, Lo Yosef, I'm not going to go ahead and destroy the world. Lo Yishbois, so everything's going to be consistent. So we say that it's not just alone from the pleasing fragrance of Noach's sacrifice, it's specifically from the spiritual work of self-sacrifice from the times of Abraham and Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and in the times of the Shmad. Not only that, so a step further, we have to understand, because when it comes to self-sacrifice, there's three ideas, and there's three levels, and we know from the lowest to the highest. In other words, you had the self-sacrifice of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah is obviously greater than the self-sacrifice of Avraham Avinu. Why? Because in the time of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the test was much greater. So how could it be that after we already had the Beit HaMikdash, and after we had King Solomon, that you can have, God forbid, that non-Jews should be dancing in the temple? And the test, and therefore the self-sacrifice of later on generations, the generation when they wanted the Jewish people to give it to Judaism, is much greater. And you can't compare from the test and the self-sacrifice of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. In other words, because after the long, long exile, and all the decrees, and all the killing of God forbid, of Jewish people because they were Jewish. How is it possible that it's not enough? And the Rebbe was still in exile, and in a dark exile, in a double dark exile. And sadly, from time to time, there's things that happen that we don't have an explanation. We don't understand what's going on from any level. But nevertheless, even after Abraham, Hanani, Mishael, Azariah, the generations of the Shema, when they wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and now in Golus, and even after all the concealments, the generation, what do they do? Like the Medrash says, that this generation is referring on the third level. It's the generation that's connected with Zeh. What's the idea of Zeh? Because we know Zeh is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, and like Chazal teach us that. All the prophets, the greatest prophets, when they prophesied Koyama Hashem. So Hashem said. However, Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied with Zed. This is what Hashem says. But this idea, and there's the connection of the generation of the people that stood strong for God, even though their life was on the line, and they reached the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Where do we see that? That even after the work that we're looking for the face of Hashem, the internal part of Hashem, there's still concealments. But nevertheless, we do our work in a way of Yaakov, that we take the Yud, Hashem, onto the lowest places and we do it everlasting. Why is that? And the Rebbe explains like this. The main work of Mevakshe Panecha, that was searching the face of Hashem in a revealed way, that's in the month of Elul, that we just had. And as we say clearly in the prophets, Bakshu Panai is Panach Hashem Avakesh. We say in the Psalms that we're looking for the face of Hashem. And what do we finish off? Kaveh El Hashem. We want to cleave to Hashem, because those are the things, and we have faith in Hashem, because those things that need strength. And that's in the month of Elul. That's the first level. Then we go to later on, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and then we're written and we're sealed for a good life. L'shana Torah for a good year, a sweet year in a revealed way, and it comes down into the next level. We have the holiday of Simchaseinu, the holiday of a double joy. Like it says, Yismach Hashem b'masav, God is happy with the creation that He created, and V'yismach Yisrael b'osav, and the Jewish people are happy, the one that created us. And they're both in one word, Simchaseinu, the double joy. Hashem is happy with us, and we're happy with Hashem. And especially when we come to the holiday of Simchas Torah, which the Simcha over there is infinite. And as we know, when the Simcha of Simchas Torah is done with singing and with dancing, because we know dancing is where the idea of dancing is that the joy penetrates every single attribute that we have, or every single limb that we have, even to our feet, the lowest part of us. And up to the point that the feet, which is the lowest part, they actually elevate the head. In other words, that the head is dancing thanks to the feet. And how do we dance? Without any calculations. And not only that, when it comes to the dancing, the hakafot, so the head is what picks up and elevates and causes not only our head to dance, but the feet is causing the Torah to dance. And not only the Torah, the part of Torah that we comprehend, the lower level of Torah, but even the higher level of Torah, which is beyond comprehension. Because we know when you dance on Simchas Torah, you don't open the Torah to learn it and then you dance. The Torah is closed with its covering. And so we're referring to what level of Torah when the Torah is closed, referring to the level of Torah which is above understanding. So what do we see? That the tremendous power of the joy and the celebration that Jewish people celebrate the Torah, when the Torah is covered up, so we elevate, even on this level of Torah. And there's he'd like to connect this, the Alter explains in the Torah about the tremendous quality of the kafot. And that's the reason why it's so powerful that it's not even written as a halacha in the Torah. And it's only a custom, and but unfortunately, even after all that, we have the darkness of exile, and the darkness and the double darkness of all the terrible things that are happening with people that literally are going to do a mitzvah. But nevertheless, even after all the concealments, we stand strong on our position. We stand strong in a way of Selah without any changes, and like it says, Yaakov Selah. Why? Because this type of work, where we do it everlasting and there's no change and we don't get flustered, that comes from Yaakov. Yaakov, like we said, is Yud, the letter of Hashem's name, Akev, that goes into the heel. Now, even when the Jewish person is on the level of a heel, which means, Akev means referring to the heels, referring to all the concealment, what shines through our concealment is the Yud of Hashem. And that's the connection between the generation of that they wanted to wipe us out, which is called Der Hashmad, which connected to the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because why? Because even though we were in a darkness, a double darkness, and the lowest level of darkness, but we still serve Hashem in a way of Selah. And it was like literally like you're seeing God in a revealed way, up to the point that you take your finger and say, "Oh, we see Hashem." In the darkness, you say, "I see Hashem. Hashem is with me right here." And not only that, there's a quality in the work of self-sacrifice of this generation, even higher than Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though we're saying on one hand, we're saying we're like a Moshe Rabbeinu. We're saying no, it's even higher. Like we know the teaching the Chabad Rebbeim, based on what it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was very, very humble from all the people that existed. Because why is Moshe Rabbeinu so humble? Because he saw the self-sacrifice of the generation before Mashiach comes. He goes, wow, with all the darkness, all the concealment, all the challenges were still strong. Moshe Rabbeinu was totally blown away. Now, based on this, the Rebbe asks a huge question. This that we're saying, that the bond that God made with Noach, and what was it? Because he smelled the pleasing fragrance of self-sacrifice up to the generation of that when people had to give over their life for Judaism. But the fact is, the bond with Noach was the word that the world should last. Which part of the world? The external world. And like I explained in many, many places in Chassidut, the difference between the bond that God had with Noach and the bond that God had with Abraham and Moshe, that the bond with Noach was for the world. When God made the bond, because he's part of the pre fragrance, the world's going to exist. But the bond that God made with Abraham, and that he made with Moshe Rabbeinu, was referring to learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And the bond with Moshe Rabbeinu was tshuva. So there's three bonds. The bond for Noach, the world should exist. The bond with Avraham Avinu was for the Torah and the mitzvahs. And the bond for Moshe Rabbeinu is the whole concept of tshuva, that we can turn to Hashem. So if that's the case, the question is, why do we need the spiritual work of self-sacrifice? And on the highest level, what's wrong with the bond with Noach for the world to exist? And everybody says the idea is as follows. Based on what it says, Vayiskar Elokim es Noach. The verse says, God, and referring to which name of God, Elokim, God remembered Noach. And that happens before God smelled a pleasing fragrance. And it was this remembrance, like it says, also Noach, God remembered with love. We say it in the prayers. Where does that love come? It comes from an internal and essential love that God had. I never like to connect this. What Rashi says, that this that says by Yiskar Elokim, that Elokim remembered. We know Elokim is judgment. Because why? What's that? If it's remembering, it's usually love. It should be Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And the answer is no, because the Yiskar Elokim, that even the attribute of judgment was transformed to compassion. And this type of compassion, when judgment gets transformed into compassion, is obviously the greatest compassion that exists, which comes from an internal love and an essential love. And that's why the verse says, Vayiskar Elokim es Noach. And we say it actually from the verses in the Musaf service in Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because these verses is to bring a proof from the Torah and to affirm that everything that's taking place in Rosh Hashanah, that we should draw down from a place, from a source, up to the essence of Hashem, and from those highest places to come down into the world, to come down in an internal way, and this way you actually make a change in the external worlds. So what do we see from here? How much more so? When it comes to the bond with Noach, which came after the remembrance, even though the bond is for the world should exist, what is the intent? The intent is not just the world should exist, but the world should exist based on the intention. And why did Hashem create the world? Hashem created the world to make a dwelling place for God for down here. Who fulfills that dwelling place? The Jewish people. And that's why the bond with Noach, that the world should exist, and like it says, the world's going to be consistent, it's not going to be destroyed anymore. What's the ultimate goal? To reveal the concept that Ani Hashem lo yishanisi. In other words, by Hashem saying, I'm going to keep the world, there's not going to be any radical changes, there's not going to be highs and lows and ups and downs. What's the purpose? The purpose is to point out that Ani Hashem lo yishanisi, there's going to be consistency. And like it's explained many places, in reference to the quality of the way Hashem runs the world in a natural order versus the miracles. In other words, we know Hashem either from the way nature exists, things are consistent. We also know Hashem from the miracles that happen. And since nature is the idea of lo yishboisu, nothing changes, meaning everything is consistent. So in here, that's when you see the power of lo shanisi, that everything is consistent. How do you have that things should be consistent? Because nature is also a miracle. That comes from the power, the infinite power of Hashem, which is higher than limitations and changes. And literally, it even goes to the essence of any light and revelation, because in the essence you have the true, ultimate power that things should be consistent. Now, since the reason and the internal reason for the bond, the world should exist, which means referring to the external worlds, and like it says that God remembered Noach. And why did God keep the real world? Is because of his internal and his essential bond with the Jewish people. So therefore, the internal bond that why Hashem kept the world is that the world should be consistent. That everything in this world should help the Jewish people in the service of Hashem. And this mode of apparatus where the world is consistent and everything should help Hashem should be in a way that there shouldn't be any changes, because that's the ultimate reason and revealing the idea of what that our things aren't going to change to help the Jewish people, that we can continue to serve Hashem. And that's why, since ultimately the bond was, yes, for the external worlds, but really was for the Jewish people to do their service of Hashem. That's why the bond with Noach, like it says, "Vayarach Hashem es reich nichayach," and it's not referring to not only on the sacrifices, like the literal translation of the verses, but it's also referring to the service of self-sacrifice up to the ultimate self-sacrifice, like the Medrash explains. Why is that? Because since the idea of lo yishboisu, that consistency should be every single day in this world, comes from where? It comes from a very high place, from revealing the infinite part of Hashem, and to the true part of the infinite part of Hashem, which comes from the essence of Hashem. So therefore, in order to accomplish that, you have to go not only just from the fact that they brought sacrifice, but you have to bring in the whole idea of the pleasing preference of the self-sacrifice. In other words, even though you're going to say, 1 second, when you bring a sacrifice, that's also, when you bring a carbon, that's also self-sacrifice. And like it's explained in many books, that what happens when you bring a sacrifice, a person has to stand there and think that everything that's happening to the sacrifice, and especially the fat and the blood, which is the main sacrifice, really should have happened to the person. But Hashem was very, very kind, and instead of the happening to a human being, it happens to the sacrifice. So seemingly that's enough, but no, because drawing in the real infinite part of Hashem comes from what? Self-sacrifice. Specifically, which is higher than the regular sacrifice. Now, even though we say that the power of the sacrifice goes to the power of the infinite part of Hashem, in Kabbalah it's called Raza the Korbana, Oila Ad Raza the Ein Sof, but it's referring to what type of infinite part of Hashem, that you can just call it infinite. In other words, there's a beginning and there's an end, and you're saying that there's no end to it. Now, and what is the infinite part that's quantifiable? That's the sphere of Kesser. And that, yes, the sacrifice reaches the infinite part, but it's connected to Kesser. However, in order to draw down the infinite part that is not connected with a beginning or an end, and especially connecting to the essence of Hashem, and which is basically the ultimate, the idea of where things aren't going to change, this comes specifically what? Through real self-sacrifice. And like we know, the difference between the bringing of regular sacrifice and bringing the incense. So even though a sacrifice and the incense, they're both the idea of a reach, of a scent, but nevertheless, specifically the scent of the incense reaches higher than the sacrifice. And the same thing also when it comes to the Ketores in itself. There's many levels. In other words, you have the Ketores, which reaches the right hole, and then you have the Ketores which reaches the left hole, which is right and left. The same thing also when it comes to the self-sacrifice, which is higher than the Ketores, obviously reaches even higher than the level of the Ketoret. And since the bond that the world should exist and it should be consistent, and it comes from a level of Hashem that lo shanisi, there is no changes, and where does that take place? That's connected to the essence of Hashem. So that's why it says in the Medrash when it says Vayorach Hashem Yisreich Nichayich, Hashem smelt a pleasing fragrance, it's not referring to just the regular sacrifice, but it's specifically speaking about the self-sacrifice. And not only is the self-sacrifice of the first level of Avraham Avinu, or the second level of Chananya, Mishal, Azariah, but the Dereshma, the generation that they will put their life on dangers for Hashem, but it's referring to the self-sacrifice of the generation before Mashiach comes, which is a part of the Dereshma. That what does that mean? We don't go ahead and we're not worried and we're not concerned about any concealments and any issues and anything that's holding us back and anything that's trying to stop us. But we stand strong on our loyals and our values, and in the way of Selah, in an everlasting way. Why is that? Because the fragrance of this type of serving Hashem, in a way that's everlasting, which is we're not making changes, that brings in the true Lo Shanisi. So in other words, when we are living a life of Torah and mitzvahs, despite the highs and lows that we experience, and we're consistent in our relation with Hashem, so Hashem continues keeping this world running in a consistent way. And that's why he says, Ani Hashem lo shanisi. I am Hashem, he didn't change. The Atam b'nei Yaakov lo chalisam, and the literal translation, the children of Yaakov were not wiped out, in other words, but we explains differently. Because b'nei Yaakov, the children of Yaakov, lo chalisam, you weren't wiped out. In other words, what does that mean? That even though when we're in a level of Yaakov, we have Yud, the infinite power of Hashem, when we're dealing with challenges, but we stand strong in an everlasting way, like Kalistim. We don't go ahead, we're not flustered, and we don't change. And like we explained before, that this generation, Yaakov Salah, that even when the generation, which we're referring to again, our generation, we're in the level of Yaakov, but nevertheless we stand strong. And up to the point of Atam and Esau, like Kalistim, the Bnei Yaakov, we don't go ahead and we're not wiped out. And then the question is it possible we're not wiped out? And even though we're in the level of Yaakov, but no, the prophets goes, how's it possible? But we stand strong, and when we do that, we're able to draw in the level of Hashem, which is called Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi. The Rebbe says this idea is connected to the month of Tishrei. And like I explained in many places, the difference between the month of Nisan and the month of Tishrei. Because the month of Nisan, that's a month of miracles. God took us out of Egypt. But Tishrei is all about nature, all about not making any changes, that we do our work. And when we make proper resolutions in the month of Tishrei to serve Hashem, by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs from a place of strength, that nothing's going to go ahead and stop us. And nothing's going to go ahead and shake us. And especially in the holiday of Simcha, of joy, Sukkot, and especially in the holiday, and when we get to, and how much more so, the holiday of Simchas Torah, we bring down the power to serve Hashem with joy for the whole year. In other words, even when it comes to being happy with doing a mitzvah, which is obviously it's tremendous work, and you have to work hard to always be happy. But nevertheless, every single Jewish person was commanded, and we were commanded on this powerful level of joy, just like King David. Like the prophet says, he was dancing, he was celebrating, he was extremely joyful in front of Hashem. And like the Rambam says, and the Rambam brings this example of King David, in reference to the commandment that every single Jewish person was commanded on joy, because through King David, we have the power and the ability for every single person to experience that level of joy. And this level of simcha, of joy, has to be not only when you're doing mitzvahs which are connected to joy, like for example Simchas Torah or Simchas Beis Sheva we just had, as it says clearly in the verse of Samachnu L'fnei Hashem Elokeichem, you have to be happy in front of Hashem for 7 days, which is referring to the simcha of taking the lulav, like it says in the Talmud Yerushalmi, but by every mitzvah. Like our Rambam finishes off and he says that a person has to be happy when you do a mitzvah, and any type of mitzvah, in a way that mefaz and mecharke, you have to be superly excited. And when a person stands strong in serving Hashem throughout the whole year, and especially when you do it in a way of tremendous joy, that you don't get intimidated and you don't get distracted and you don't get flustered from all the concealments and all the challenges, and it doesn't move you, and you serve Hashem with strength and with joy, a revealed joy, everlasting joy. So you bring down from high the power of Lo Shanisi. That what gets revealed is that the world operates in Lo Yishboi, so there's no change. In other words, the internal intent is that the nature of the world, that you plant and you grow and things grow at different seasons, but nevertheless nothing really changes. That's going to help the Jewish people, the world is going to help the Jewish people in their service of Hashem. Now, Even though this is on a spiritual level, but the fact that it says no, it affects the external world. And like it's explained that when you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, so even though the blowing the shofar is affecting spiritual worlds, but the fact is it affects the physical world as well. Now, even though a person doesn't see it, and there's many experiences and incidents that happened, but nevertheless we stand strong and with strong hope that whatever happened of the negative is finished. And like it says, "Loy takum hamayim," it's not the challenge don't happen twice; they only happen once. And once you get over it, it's done. And from here on, the Rebbe said, it should only be good, revealed good that's tangible, like the promises that were given from the different Chabad Rebbeim. And when we stand strong in serving Hashem, and especially with simcha, with joy, we're able to break all the boundaries up to the internal intent of the world, that the world will help the Jewish people. And we affect the external world, and we should see it in the revealed way. That what does that mean, revealed way? Those that were initially causing pain to the Jewish people, and also the terrible thing that we're doing, because we know we're one little nation amongst the 70 nations, big ones, etc. But they are going to turn around to help the Jewish people, like actually we're seeing today, and like it says in the beginning of the parsha. That the Rebbe said that the Rebbe says in Parshas Noach. So the next parsha he's going to start reading on Mincha, where it says Lech lecha mi'artzara, you're to leave the land. God tells Abraham, leave the land and the place you're born, your parents' home, and then once you leave, I'm going to bless you. You're going to become famous. You're going to be a blessing, and up to the point that all the nations are going to bless you. And this was to Avram Avinu, but Abraham gave this over to every single Jewish person, that when you go out of your nature, and like to explain that length in the Chassidic discourse of Lech Lecha, all the different ideas of Artzecha, Maladcha, Sevicha, all the different levels, that what's going to happen is even simple people are going to help the Jewish people. Like it says, and just like it says in the prophets, that the strangers are going to come and they're going to take care of the sheep, which is going to be like Mashiach comes. But then you have to wait till then. Even in the time of exile, in the darkness of exile, in the darkness right before Mashiach comes, anything that's stopping us is going to get nullified, and on the contrary, it's going to be transformed to helping. And this will be a proper preparation to fulfill the promise that God is going to be the king of the world. We're going to have God's kingdom all over the world, even in the 70 nations of the world, and everything that's connected to Him. Like it says clearly in reference to Mashiach comes, v'nigla kvoid Hashem, God's going to be revealed, v'ro kol basar yachtav, everyone's going to see, even the animals are going to see, ki pi Hashem dibur, that Hashem is the one that's speaking. Now, the sacrifices that Noach brought, he brought it from all the pure animals and from all the pure birds that were in the Ark of Noach. So what do we see from here? That when Hashem smelled the pleasing fragrance, and when, like we learned, even the pleasing fragrance of the self-sacrifice of the sacrifice of Noach is connected all to what? To the Ark of Noach, because everything came from the Ark of Noach. So the Rebbe explains, we're going to understand this based on what it's known, that what was the Ark of Noach? The Ark of Noach was peace. Because the fact is, in the Ark of Noach, you had all the animals, domesticated wild animals, everyone was there together. Literally on the level of the peace where it's going to be like a Mashiach comes. Like it says clearly in prophecy, that the wolf will lie with the lamb. And it's also connected to the month of Tishrei. Like we know that the holiday of Sukkot, we're sitting in Sukkot right now, when I'm recording the class, of the month of Tishrei, and the Ark of Noach, it's the same idea. Why? Because Sukkah is all about shalom, peace. Like it says, Shuka Shleimecha. So the Ark of Noach is connected to what? The idea of peace. Now, when it comes to peace, there's three, which is basically, we just spoke to, 3 levels of peace. The Sukkah that we're sitting in, which is peace, the Ark of Noach, which was peace, and the future Mashiach comes going to all have peace. Where does peace come from? Peace comes from one place, Das. Like it says about the peace when it comes in the future, Mashiach comes and says, Lo yirei v'lo yishchisu. Why is that? Why is everyone going to get along? Ki mala aretz deyas Hashem k'mayim l'olam chasim. Because there's Deah. When there's Das, there's peace. So what do you see? The same thing also when it comes to the peace in the Sukkah. Comes from where? From Das. Like it says clearly, L'man yedu. Use the bud word of Das. And the same thing also when it comes to the peace in Noach, obviously it's from Das. So knows the Ark of Noach is Das, the Sukkah is, the Ark of Noach is peace, the Sukkah is peace, the future is peace, and it all comes from Das, just like the future. And the Sukkah is coming from the idea of Das. The same thing also in the Noach Ark, the reason why you had peace is from Das. So based on this, we'll understand the connection between the Ark of Noach, with the idea that what? That God smelled the pleasing fragrance. Why? Because what's the idea of the Ark of Noach? It's peace. What is peace? Peace means you're taking two opposites and unifying them. And the same thing also when it comes to pleasing fragrance of self-sacrifice. And up to the highest level of self-sacrifice of the generation when they were trying to wipe out the Jewish people, the generation before Mashiach, it's basically uniting two opposites. Why? Because on one hand you have concealments of the time of the generation before Mashiach comes. And especially you have that episodes that there's no reason for those episodes. It doesn't make sense. It's opposite of holiness. So that's on one hand. The darkness is huge. But nevertheless, we take the darkness and we transform it into holiness. Not only doesn't bother us anymore from serving Hashem, on the contrary, it actually adds more power and more energy in serving Hashem, up to self-sacrifice in a real way, and in potential, and then in a real way, because the fact is where a person's mind is, that's where a person is, and not only are you overcome it, but you actually fulfill the commandment of to serve Hashem with simcha, with joy, that everything that we do, our learning Torah, our doing a mitzvot, and even what we do, simple things that we do it all for Hashem. Like it says, "B'chol drachecha de'eyu," and everything I know it for Hashem, and we do it in a way of real simcha, real joy. And because of this, so that the Jewish people can go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, to serve God with joy, so they take away from them all the challenges, all the concealment, up to the point that even in the time of exile, but for the Jewish people, there's light in everything in their life. Now, so basically what he's saying is that peace is basically two opposites. And the same thing also when it comes to in Gullus. Gullus is two opposites. On one hand you have the darkness, but on the other hand we transform it to positive. Now the vessel to go ahead to create this is literally peace. How do you do that? By bringing close the hearts of the Jewish people. Like it says, to love everybody. You're you, and now me, we love each other. We're creating peace. And literally, kamoicha mamash, like myself. And like to explain in the Chassidic discourse of the Parashah Noach, in reference to the real power of achdas, unity, and the skalas becoming one. When you go ahead and create unity, you bring in the power of Yud Kei Vav Kei, because this name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, even though it's one of the 7 names that you cannot erase, and it's connected to the specific sphere of Tiferes, like the other names, but nevertheless it's the essential name, and it's the most powerful name of Hashem. And it's explained that in all the spheroids, so just the light, you have a light, every sphere you have a light in the vessel, just the light is from Yud Kei Vav Kei. However, when it comes to the sphere of Tiferes, even the vessel is from Yud Kei Vav Kei. And since the light and the vessel, like we know, light is light and the vessel is a vessel, it's two opposites. So you see that when you unify and you unite the light and the vessel of Tiferes, because they're both connected to Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's connecting and unifying two opposites. And besides the connection of the two opposites, the light and the vessel of Tiferes itself, but the fact is the sphere of Tiferes, which is basically the middle sphere, because Chesed and Gvura, Tiferes is in the middle, it unifies Chesed and Gvura, the right and the left, and that it's in the middle. Tiferes is in the middle, so you have, because it's in the middle, it's connected to all the 10 spheres. You connect to the right spheres, it's connected to the left spheres, and you literally unify the middle sphere. And we know that in reference to the sphere of Tiferes, and the same thing also in reference to all the other middle spheres. Besides the fact that Tiferes is unified of Chesed and Gvura, but you also have the essential part of Tiferes, which is higher than the fact that it unifies Chesed and Gvura together. And since we know we are called Adam was the first man, why are we called Adam? Because Adam al Elyon are compared to Hashem. So the same thing also with the Jewish people, that we have the 10 different levels. Like it says in the Torah, Roshechem, the head people, the Sheftechem, you have the wood choppers, you have the water carriers, which are connected to the 10 different spheres we come from. Like Alter explains in Kanya, in reference to the 10 different levels of every single soul. And the sphere of Tiferes, which is the middle one, what is the middle one? Is Atem and Tzavim, we're standing Kulchem together, that all the different types of the Jewish people, from the highest ones to the lowest one, we literally become, through Tiferes, we become one. And this oneness that we become, how does that happen? It happens from the revelation of the infinite part of Hashem, which is above different levels. And the same thing also, the oneness that is created from the 10 spheres of every single soul, that happens by a person realize that, you know, the fact that you have the intellectual sphere, the emotional. So how do you unify it? You unify it through the power of something which is called Kabbalah Soil, accepting, which we know the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the idea of Kabbalah Soil, that's the beginning of any service of Hashem. You have to start with Kabbalah Soil, then you can unify, and also self-sacrifice, which is above different divisions. And we go ahead and we unify, and we become one with the Jewish people. Then we bring in Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then when we're unified and we bring in Yud Kei Vav Kei, and this is the secret to any success. Unity, bring in Yud Kei Vav Kei, you can do anything you want. And whatever you do, nothing will happen to you. And even when you sadly do something which is not okay, like the Chazal tell us, and based on the verse where it says, and where it says in the prophet about by gathering the bones of Ephraim, and it says Hanachle, the Ephraim is busy with Avodah Zarah, but nevertheless leave them alone. Why? Because they're unified. When you're unified, sadly, even if when they were serving idols, Hanachle, leave them alone. And we go out to war and we're successful. And the same thing also, and how much more so, when the Jewish people are learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, because we know that Torah is called peace, and the whole purpose of Torah is to bring peace in the world. And especially after we do all our work of the month of Tishrei, which basically comes for the whole year, and especially after our spiritual work of Simchas Torah, which is the end of the month of Tishrei. And as we know, Simchas Torah is all about the singing and dancing. So in singing and dancing, you see the unity of the Jewish people, because the fact is nobody sings or dances differently. When it comes to learning, someone comprehends more, someone comprehends less. When it comes to dancing, we're all together, and we go out and we're successful. And we go to war. And we don't even need war. And we don't even have to put any fear against the opposition, because basically Hashem will put the fear on them. And even those that were opposing will end up helping, like it says clearly in Psalms, Pada b'shalom nafshi mikravli, that our souls are going to be redeemed in peace from those that are close to me. What does that mean? That even those that were initially, they were fighting us, but then you have real peace, and there's no even room for any type of war, and we're going to have the ultimate peace. Like from the level where it says that the king, this peace, what kind of peace you're going to have? You're going to have off the charts peace, and that's why you're going to have no change, no difference, and everything's going to be consistent. And the Rebbe finishes off and he says, and when you go ahead and when you unify and you become one of the Jewish people, from the highest, from the leaders to the wood choppers, the water carriers, we bring in, like we learned, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the source of all the blessings and everything that we need. And not only that, more than that, we get wealth, and not only wealth that we're not lacking anything, but real wealth. And this wealth comes in the beginning of the year. It comes right after we blow the shofar, like we know it says in Chazal that it gets rich at the end. In other words, what does it mean at the end? Right after Tkiyah Shofar, the wealth comes in, and especially after all the work of the month of Tishrei, which comes after Tkiyah Shofar. And how much more so that we annul anything that's holding us back. And on the contrary, any opposition becomes a helper. And as like we explained before, that when a person goes out of your natural setting and your comfort zone, like it says, Lech lecha me'atzcha, leave your land and your way you do things and your custom and the way you etc. Then v'nivrecha b'chal chamish masam, and then you get ultimate blessings. And what the blessings are, like the prophet says, that the nations will come and they'll take care of everything you need to, just like it's going to be like in the future Mashiach ones. And we don't have to wait till then. That even in time of exile, not only are they not going to oppose the Jewish people, but they're actually going to help the Jewish people. Because we know it says for the Jewish people, we're going to have light in our dwellings, and we take with us the holy sparks of holiness, our silver, our gold, and how much more so with our children, our grandparents, our grandchildren, Kahal Gadol, the whole community. It's going to happen very, very soon with the redemption, the true redemption, the complete redemption through Mashiach Tzidkenu. He should come and redeem us and take us upright to Eretz Yisrael, B'mheira v'yameinu mamash. Here you have a beautiful, beautiful, powerful Chassidic discourse in the Rebbe about the real many combined components. But I just want to finish on one point, that when we have unity, when we have peace, we bring in Yud Kei Vav Kei, and that is the key for all the blessings. Let's hope we have all the blessings with the coming of Mashiach. And next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.